Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the fallout from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's address to a joint meeting of the United States Congress this week. Joining me now is PJ Crowley. He is a former spokesman at the U.S. Department of State, and he is a professor at George Washington University. Also with us is Matthew Brodsky. He is a Middle East and Jewish affairs analyst, and he is a senior analyst at Wikistruct. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Pleasure. Good to be here.
PJ Crowley, we've heard the speech being described as extraordinary. I don't think we've seen anything like it. And we're hearing many commentators say that here we have a foreign leader who came here, addressed Congress, and did his best to undermine U.S. foreign policy.
I mean, the circumstances of the speech, how it came, to be not only close to the Israeli election, but also literally happening while the Secretary of State is in Geneva negotiating the nuclear deal. That's disconcerting. By the same token, it was an exceptional speech. The Prime Minister made what he believes is a case from the Israeli point of view, the concerns that Israel has about the negotiation. From an American standpoint, it's just worth reminding that there's a very significant overlap between the national interest of Israel, the national interest of the United States, but they're not identical.
Matthew, the point that Prime Minister Netanyahu made, he insisted in his speech, was that when you look at these nuclear talks that are going on with Iran right now, that any deal is going to be a bad deal. Let's listen to part of what he said.
My friends, for over a year, we've been told that no deal is better than a bad deal. Well, this is a bad deal. It's a very bad deal.
And the response from the White House to that was that the Prime Minister offered no real alternative. So what did the speech achieve?
Let's see, that's very interesting just to begin with. So the White House response, again, after President Obama specifically said and warned Netanyahu, do not leak any new information, do not say anything new, it'll undermine negotiations. So Netanyahu heeds that warning, and then Obama fires back, you didn't say anything new. Luckily for Netanyahu, he didn't really need to say much new because the deal on its face is very bad. And it's not a matter of no deal, versus a bad deal. This is the joint, the JPOA, the agreement that we've been under since the end of 2013 has been bad to begin with. And we've been surrendering leverage over the past few years. So the main problem is we've already exceeded what is acceptable to most of America's regional allies, and the deal, as is being reported, the contours of it are absolutely unacceptable. So what Netanyahu's speech did was lay out the most eloquent manner of what the position is against it. And I don't understand, in a vibrant democracy such as the United States, why is the White House appearing to be afraid of an open, honest debate? Why is it trying to keep Congress out of debating on it? These are moves that the White House is making. Why not have a debate? Why not say what is in the package? If it's not as Netanyahu said, then say what it is.
PJ, did the United States cede leverage by moving on and trying to get a deal with Iran here?
Well, I do think that the Prime Minister did advance an alternative. The dilemma for Israel is that what Netanyahu actually wants, which is no civilian nuclear program after a deal, is not a deal that Iran is willing to make. So what Netanyahu really wants is not really an option. I do think yesterday what Netanyahu ultimately said was, if it's a matter of inspections that give the international community the highest possible understanding of what's happening in Iran, and an assurance that if there is a breakout towards a bomb, the international community will know. Netanyahu's alternative is, let's just stick with the status quo. He believes that sanctions are an alternative to inspections. That's a reasonable debate. I happen to believe that inspections are the better option.
If we look at the broad picture here of the relationship between Israel and the United States, there's been some pretty strong reaction from Democrats. The leader of the Democratic Party in the House said she was, and I'm quoting here, saddened by the insult to the intelligence of the United States as part of the P5+1 nations. That's the permanent 5 UN members and Germany. And saddened, she said, by the condescension toward our knowledge of the threat posed by Iran.
Wow.
We don't, PJ Crowley, we don't normally hear those words from leaders in the United States when they're talking about Israel.
But I think that is where, you know, I thought it was a very good speech yesterday, and I think the Prime Minister of Israel has every right, you know, to come to the United States and convey on behalf of the Israeli people the perspective of his government. I do think that the circumstances under which this speech occurred, the fact that the White House was not consulted in advance either by the Israeli government or by the Congress, you know, has added risk, you know, to the relationship. I think ultimately both sides will work hard, you know, to close this breach. I thought the Prime Minister was very gracious yesterday in terms of his, you know, his gestures towards, you know, the President of the United States. But nonetheless, you know, it is the manner in which this visit came about that has exacerbated some of the tensions that have existed at the leadership level.
Right. Can I just say?
Yeah. Oh, okay, go ahead.
What's basically happened then is you had Nancy Pelosi, basically, is what you were saying. She is essentially sad that the Prime Minister of Israel, who this deal will affect most directly, she's sad that he is explaining why the deal would be destructive toward the country. I mean, really.
I mean, the other thing that, and we've heard a lot of criticism about this as well, is that this looked, felt, and sounded like a State of the Union speech, that the Israeli Prime Minister here was being...
Well, it's his third speech before a joint session of Congress.
If you look at the optics of the manner in which he entered the chamber, the handshakes, the waves to the crowd, the use of putting people in the chamber that he referenced, Elie Wiesel was there, he referenced that. It looked very much like a State of the Union. It led one black Democrat House member to say, this is a real slap in the face at the president, and black folks know why.
These are the people who boycotted the speech as though one of America's greatest allies is Ahmadinejad or some enemy of the state. Right. I think as you go on in the future politically, there may be a cost for them, but I guess we'll see. But their viewpoint, if it basically breaks down on Israel has no right to say that the deal is wrong or bad, or to make the case, which clearly many members of the House and Senate thought that Netanyahu would be able to articulate better than they. I just don't see why it's a problem that he would say that, and why they can't listen to it, and why they wouldn't again be pushing to have a say in the outcome of an agreement. In an agreement, they're not pushing for that.
Right, PJ Crowley, was there damage done here to Israeli-U.S. relations?
I mean, the irony behind the speech is that, notwithstanding clear tension between the Prime Minister and the President, they don't like each other very much, but they do manage that relationship, and we'll see what happens on March 17 and in terms of changes in the Israeli government, what that means for the relationship. Ironically, aside from that tension, the actual government-to-government relations between the United States and Israel right now have never been better, as the Prime Minister alluded to yesterday. You know, the breadth of the strategic relationship is very deep, very broad. The level of cooperation across the government is very significant. So I do think that there will be a need on both sides after the election, depending on the composition of the new Israeli government, you know, to take some decisive actions to close this breach, make sure it's not permanent.
The relationship is, as you're saying, it's stronger and transcends these two individuals. Absolutely.
Very quickly, Matthew, was this a party political speech?
A party political speech? One can make the case that he could have made the speech after, but he's not. But Netanyahu is not responsible for setting up the March deadline that the United States and the P5+1 set up. So that's the inherent problem. Perhaps he could have waited, but there's been far too big of a focus on the process and on the politics, on the tactics, and not enough focus on the substance of what he had to say, which is just how bad this agreement is, not just for Israel, but for the United States as well.
Matthew Brodsky, PJ Crowley, thanks to both of you for joining us. We will take a break right now. How has Iran responded to Netanyahu's speech? Next, a view from Tehran. Stay with us. You're watching The Heat.